I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Especially like to thank Ms. Davis for making the trip out here from Falls Church. Really appreciate your time. I've seen the movie a couple of times, and I just think it's really important for our community and our country to try and, develop social capital, right?
Yeah. I might be preaching to the choir here, though. As I drove in, I saw the beautiful Main Street. I drove by a moose lodge. So I think, we'll probably be, this audience is probably primed for this conversation.
So we're going to open it up to any questions. I've got a couple starter questions, but for those of you that don't know, my name is Bret Hrbek. I'm the district governor for our Rotary district, which is one of the sponsors and instigators of having this film. It came about because one of our Rotary districts in North Carolina had screened it, and I saw that, and I got on the horn because I've been a fan of Dr. Putnam's work. Fan isn't the right word, but interested in Dr. Putnam's work for a long time, and belief in social capital. And the funny thing is that my grandfather was an Oddfellow. He was pretty much, he was the joiner. He was a member of every club probably in his town. But he was an Oddfellow. My grandmother, I shouldn't say this, but my grandmother called him the Oddfellows and Gay Ladies. So that was her. You just got to imagine what a Southern lady like that is. But anyway, so tell us about what got you interested in this particular subject. I mean, it's kind of an obscure thing to do. So Dr. Putnam's not like a cinema.
Right. Yes, as you're trying to fundraise for a film about, an 80-something-year-old professor, especially in the world that we live in now of true crime and celebrity docs. It was initially, I think, a little bit of a hard sell as we're getting off the ground, but that was also, before we hit the pandemic. That was in 2017 was when we approached Robert Putnam. And I should say, I am Pete's sister. So you met my brother Pete, and he was the one narrating. He was a student of Robert Putnam, so we were a brother-sister team on this film. We never had any intention of kind of going into, working on something together, but things kind of, aligned on this project where he had a personal connection to Bob, having been a student of his. And when we approached him in 2017, Robert Putnam was retiring from teaching, and I was working at that time as a camerawoman and news producer, and I was covering a lot of the symptoms of this bowling alone phenomenon on the ground. So I was flying around the U.S. and, covering things like school shootings and the opioid epidemic, and, seeing a lot of these old Oddfellows halls in a lot of towns, looking empty and kind of, boarded up, and talking to a lot of people who felt like things were off in their community and from both sides of the political spectrum, and our attempt with this movie was really to make something that was about political science, but hopefully with a message where there was something that, any American watching this, could grab onto some part of it. And feel, part of their experience in this film.
So I know you've had quite a few inquiries and you've been showing it, and of course you're on Netflix now as well. What has been the reaction? Have we seen any kind of trends moving in the right direction? I know it's a small window since it's come out.
Yeah.
But what's the reaction in the public in terms of getting more engagement and interest in joining organizations?
Yeah, so the film was released in, do we lose power here? Maybe? Hello. I can project. We released the film in 2023. It came out at South by Southwest Film Festival exactly 2 years ago this month. So we've been touring the film for about 2 years. We've done about 300 community screenings so far, just kind of go in rooms of 25 people by 25 people, trying to get everyone in the U.S. to see the film together and have conversations. As far as the data goes, you are right, it will take kind of a few years for us to kind of see where the trends are going, and even with that, it'll be hard to say, how much this film was putting its finger on the scale versus other things, but anecdotally, I can say that, we've been really encouraged to see, how many communities are really wanting to have this conversation right now. And while I think our mainstream media paints a picture right now that there's a lot of kind of calamity and emergencies happening all the time, and I just hear from a lot of people who say they feel hopeless watching the news. I am encountering people in my life every day that are filling me with tons of hope about, the future of this country. I'm just meeting tons of people who are doing cool things in their communities, that are, fighting a lot of these isolation and loneliness trends that we're seeing in the headlines every day. And I think we need to be lifting up more of those stories. I think that was an attempt with this film, and I would love to see that happening more in our local and national media, because I think it's a lot easier to inspire people to get out of their house and get involved if you're seeing hopeful examples. Yeah.
So I was really excited when I first saw it to see that you did feature the Rotary. In my mind, I think I told you it was like 3 minutes, but it's like 30 seconds, but that's all right. How did you
And
choose?
You deserve a full documentary,
Yeah.
so maybe that'll be our
You'll
part
be your
two,
next year,
yeah.
your sequel. How did you choose the organizations that you did highlight? Because you did the Oddfellows, a Rotary, you mentioned Bob's father was Kiwanian, so
Yeah.
talked about that a little bit, and others. How did you kind of zero in on that? Just it's kind of a filmmaker question, I guess.
Yeah, and I will say we've gotten some gruff from the Masons, that we haven't gotten enough Masons in the film. We tried to touch on at least a little bit of everyone. The Rotary definitely got a good amount of time, even if it was just 30 seconds. I think that, that second to narrowing down Bob's graphs for the film, I think kind of narrowing down the clubs that we were going to feature was the second hardest thing. At one point we had narrowed down Bob's graphs to 100 that we were going to show in the film, and I was like, this is just going to be a PowerPoint presentation. And so, I think we culled those to about 10, but equally, I also had a spreadsheet of 200 potential community groups. Both the ones that we filmed with in real life, which ended up just being 6 in the end, including the Oddfellows, and then the archival material that we were drawing on. And I think, we were looking for a variety of kind of different regions, so both, organizing happening in rural areas and urban parts of the country, north, south, east, west, so we've got Atlanta, California, the Chicagoland area, and then down in Texas. And then we also wanted to show, new groups that maybe were popping up to address new needs, but also making sure that we acknowledge the incredible legacy of organizational life in America. So groups like the Oddfellows or like the Rotary that have been around for, you might know this better than I do now. Have you gone over 100 years?
We're over.
Over 100 years
we'll
now.
be,
Okay.
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. That have been around now for over 100 years, like the Rotary. But we also wanted to show groups that were bucking these decline trends. And so I think that was how we got turned on to this specific Oddfellows Lodge in Texas, because I'd read a newspaper article about, unlike, many other groups that have been struggling with membership, they were doing something different there that was pulling in kind of younger people into the fold, which I think is the challenge so many of our longstanding institutions face right now, is how to make sure we're bringing in the younger generation and getting that kind of generational transfer of knowledge of how to do this work.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to open it up for questions. Anybody wants to come up? I guess they might not be working. You can just stand up if you want. What is what at the end of the day, besides, you have a passion for making films. Obviously, that's your career as an artist. What would you want folks in this audience to leave with? Is there an action item, a call to action that you want them to take, and others that are watching this film? Or is it just for us to sit back, take it in, say, that's interesting, I'm going to go home,
Yeah.
read my book by myself,
Yeah.
or watch TV by myself?
Yeah.
So what is it what's your ultimate goal in this?
Yeah, so we tried to flip the script a little bit with this film. I think a lot of documentaries try to, put out a case for something and then at the end kind of give you the call to action, write to your senator, go do this thing. And we decided with this one to really flip the script, and the first line of narration of this film is, this is a film about why you should join a club. And then we hope that we then spend the next hour and a half proving out that point to you. So we really wanted to front load that, and I think that is our big hope, is a very, simple, actionable item that everyone can be doing in their life, which is either joining a group, if you're not in a group, you know, coming off the sidelines. And for those that are, our hope was that the film could be, you know, extra wind at their back or a pep rally, especially for a lot of our longtime organizers that I'm hearing from. You know, they're tired because they're organizing in a moment that's a difficult moment, because membership, you know, as the data shows, you know, is at a low moment right now. So it's left a lot of people feeling burnt out.
So did you come into the project with that aim in mind, that was the end in sight, or was it an aha moment as you were starting to put this together, saying, we really are onto something here, we should try to have a call of action? Or was it just something that you were putting together as more artists educating?
Yeah. No, I think it really was primary. I mean, for me, a little bit, as I was leaving, I worked for national NBC News, so I was kind of leaving the mainstream media, and I was leaving it to work on this film in a moment that I personally really needed, like a life raft out of being part of a cycle that I felt was broken, the information to action cycle. I felt like we were putting out tons of information, but I didn't feel like, I felt like people I was talking to about the news felt like they didn't know what to do. And I think part of that has been, there's been a breakdown in a lot of local news, so we're getting a ton of information about what's happening far away from us, and a lot less information about what's happening nearby. And I think that was something that drew me to Bob's work too, is he is, you know, if you ascribe to his, you know, social science, even just doing something small, like participating in your book club, participating in your pickleball league, can have very large impacts if we get enough people kind of participating in civic life again and kind of building up our stocks of social capital. It doesn't have to be that you're changing some huge policy overnight, but as we also try to show in the film, you know, people getting together in book clubs, or initially for lunches with just a couple guys as the Rotary Club started out, you know, now has thousands of chapters all over the world. And so planting those seeds now, you know, it's, who knows what they can become in the future.
So after watching the film the first time, and this was an aha moment for me, it was my 12-year-old is a runner, and he was, because of his girlfriend, he participated in the a running club for the Shenandoah Valley Runners, and signed up for these races. And it was right after Christmas, right before New Year's. There were 600 runners, and they were in the Shenandoah Valley, and that was, I would never have thought of this as social capital until I saw this, and I went, this is really cool. This is 600 people coming together. They could be doing it by themselves, but they're coming together to do this. This is positive. This is this is happening.
Yes, yes.
What aha moments did you have coming through the film itself and putting together the film that you went, I never thought of it, or now I have a new perspective on things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is our hope with the film. I mean, you know, we kind of gloss over, you know, it's very much a 101 class. You know, we touch on a lot of things really fast, but I think our big hope is that people come away with this new lens, this new social capital lens, that you can start applying to really everything, to the track meet, to how your town is designed, to how we're doing childcare, you know, to how we're, you know, running our grocery store. You know, really, you know, you can take a self-audit, you know, in every aspect of your life, you know, and start asking, is the way this system's set up, you know, building social capital or breaking it down? And I think, you know, I've tried to kind of do that in my personal relationships, you know, that much more since I've been on the film, like thinking even just small things. Do I want to send a text right now, or do I want to pick up the phone and call someone? You know, and I think for all of us, there's kind of like 100 little decisions we make all day like that. And I think if we kind of, you know, can get more people putting that social capital lens at the forefront of their decision making.
So I also noticed a lot of the film was filmed or put together during COVID.
Yeah.
So, and we know what that did to socialization or isolation.
Yeah.
How did that affect the filming and
Yeah.
the whole storytelling process right there? You're in the middle of
Right.
some isolation.
Yeah. I mean, so we were about 3 years into production at that point when the pandemic hit in 2020. We couldn't see Bob for about a year and a half. But I think it was this interesting, similar to Bob running into this perfect experiment out in the world in Italy early in his career. COVID was a social experiment where, ironically, we didn't need data, I felt, for once to know that celebrating our grandparents' birthday on Zoom didn't feel as good as celebrating it in person. That the types of conversations we were having, in the classroom when it was through a computer screen versus face-to-face didn't feel the same. And so I think that closed the question once and for all about, do we want to live in our computers? And I think we all came through that knowing we don't, without needing any data. But I think that remains the open question as we build our world now coming out of that, as so much has gone online. What do we want to keep online, because it's made certain things easier? And, what things do we want to make sure aren't getting pulled into the technology, or where is it impacting our social capital? Yeah.
So your sequel, I think, should be about Arthur Brooks. I don't know if you know Arthur Brooks or not. He wrote a book with Oprah Winfrey on happiness, on the definition of happiness.
Yes.
And it is purpose, sacrifice, and enjoyment or fulfillment. I can't remember which one it was.
That's the kind of keys to happiness.
The keys, the three ingredients to
Yep.
happiness. And my argument is it sounds like a Rotary Club to me because you have fun with other people,
Yes.
and you have sacrifice, and you have a purpose. And so
Yeah.
civic institutions and organizations like this that are more formal
Yes.
are going to provide those ingredients to happiness. But as you mentioned in the film,
Yeah.
and we talked about, it's the book clubs, it's the Red Hat ladies, it's the lunch
Yes.
clubs too. Any other thoughts on those things that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, and I hear I'll say two things. First, I love that you brought up fun first there, because I think, as groups are looking for ways to kind of, rebuild membership, I think we really need to make sure the fun doesn't fall by the wayside. And I think as so many of our groups have been, crunched for resources, sometimes there's like a hunkering down that happens where, people are focusing more just on the business aspect of it and less on kind of the fun and the joy. And that was the one thing I was so struck with as I was kind of doing archival research for this film. Groups getting together, oftentimes working, for very, serious efforts of, doing organizing work in their community, but also having so much fun, having costume parties, having banquets, having balls, bringing in like childlike joy, when you see the guys in the little cars, and I think that will remain a key ingredient as we, get more folks in this next generation involved. So that was my one thought. Where was I going with the other? The question was again, sorry, I got totally lost in thought on that.
What would your thoughts be on just you don't have to be formalized. It can be just
Right.
a group of people getting together. The picnics, the dinner
Right.
parties, things like that they talked about.
Right. Oh, yes. This is the other anecdote I was going to share. So as I'm touring this film around the country, I'm hearing all of these stories about, different people's experience in associational life. And recently, someone that I connected with had been very active in their pickleball team in Los Angeles. And, they'd been telling me how, they'd made this kind of incredible circle of friends through picking up pickleball. And when the wildfires hit, just in the last month here, one of her teammates lost their home and ended up moving in with her. And that is, and some people sometimes criticize the title as being, a little too much with the die. But, these bonds that we build really do become, life-saving and life-changing impacts for the people that are in something that can seem as silly as pickleball, but suddenly, this bond you've made there, this person is giving you shelter when you go through, what will probably be one of the largest life crises for this teammate of theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's my working theory, and I hate your opinion on it, is that we have moved, because we have lost our tribes of church, civic, community, even some sporting teams. We've now moved to tribes of politics,
Yeah.
which is really polarizing and divisive. So I love the idea. I would rather anybody that knows me knows that I'm a big Hokie person, Hokie fan.
Okay.
So I would rather us be cheering for the Hokies
Yes.
and against the Wahoos
Yes.
than Democrat versus Republican. But
Yes.
even better, some fun rivalry between the Rotarians and the Quanians.
Yes.
And as opposed to politics. So you
Yeah.
kind of see that, especially if you
Yeah.
came from NBC, you've been there. you've seen it.
Absolutely, and I think, we just need more identities to grab onto, and I think it's in our human nature to want to grab on to identity and belonging, and sometimes as we've been touring the film, we say, we need more polarization, but in other areas, so that you can, as you mentioned, be fired up about your Hokies, be fired up about your pickleball league, be fired up about being a Rotarian, so that it, can bring down the intensity, for the folks where the only identity they're clinging on to right now is that political identity. Yeah.
So you mentioned the name of the film as well, Join or Die, and I just can't help but notice, and it looked like you were alluding to it, and I want to know, to the Gadsden flag at all? Because it looked like when you were changing the font there at the beginning, it had a Gadsden flag.
Right.
Was there a connection, and why?
Yeah, well, so it was, there was a historic connection there to what is considered, supposedly to be the first political cartoon in America, Ben Franklin's cartoon. That was kind of a call to the early colonies to come together, the snake, as everyone knows. And I think that played on, we're kind of playing with the die in two senses. One, our democracy is at a real threat of going away if we aren't participating. And the other, which, we explore in the film, is kind of the personal and the health impacts of it. But, we liked that kind of, historic nod to American history there.
No, I love the
present
play on words, and
context.
it's kind of a little bit in your face, tongue in cheek, but also a little provocative. So, who has questions out here?
Hello.
Lou.
Okay, I get really close. All right, so I'm Louie. I believe I'm kind of clubbed out right now. Even tried creating my own clubs as well. Some of the problems I have trying to find clubs, because I'm not from here, so we don't have a city directory or anything. But one thing before I started joining clubs and all this stuff, my life pretty much surrounded online. So I would go into groups, I'd play video games. And I think a lot of children these days, they have their friends, they just join one game or the other. But I didn't really see that kind of addressed. I saw you starting to touch base on Meetup, which it started getting financial and people just ran away after that.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on the whole video games and online of the kids today, and even the adults, because I am an adult, but how that's impacted, because I had no desire or even thought to get physical.
Yeah, I will admit the technology question was the one we kicked that can down the road the longest until we were finally like, okay, we gotta figure out how we're gonna get this into the film, because we knew we could have made a whole documentary just on technology, and certainly other people have. But where we landed on with that question was, how do we give people a social capital lens through which to analyze technology in their life? Because the other thing I think we knew was whatever technology we brought up in 2017 or 18 when we started the film, I'm trying to think if TikTok was even on the scene at that point. It probably would have been about Facebook and Instagram, and it's entering a world where the conversation's all about AI now, and that was not really in the conversation that much yet. And there's going to be a new technology, 5 years from now that we're all kind of thinking and talking about. But our hope is with this lens that everyone can then kind of individually use it themselves to kind of analyze the role of technology in their life and ask, is it helping or is it hurting? I've heard from plenty of people that gaming communities actually are a place where people do feel they build social capital. You know, the multiplayer gaming, maybe you can speak to that even.
Yeah, I was with the group. We were spread out throughout the country, but I knew one of them personally.
Yeah.
But we would go from game to game. We'd have this game of the week, we would
Right.
call it, because we'd go to all the betas and try them out. But, you know, we'd meet up once a year in Indianapolis for Gen Con
Nice, yeah.
and hang out all together and meet each other.
Yeah.
But Inform it was a club of us.
Yes.
We had ties.
Yes, yeah, and I think we didn't want to put that qualifier on this is good and this is bad, because it really becomes a case-by-case, you know, situation. And I think, you know, certainly people in areas of the country too, or maybe they're not meeting other people with their same interests, you know, that can be a chance to open up the world to so many more people outside, you know, their small communities. But I think what we want people to ask is, are they feeling filled up by those relationships? Do they know, you know, if they're sick, they can call someone from that community to come to their house and help them? Or at least do they have other groups where they can get that? You know, and if you're doing a self-audit of your life and, you know, there aren't people that you feel like you're seen by, you know, it might be a sign to kind of open up to some other in-person circles. You know, yeah, I think, yeah, feeling, or the last thing I'll say is, will people notice if you stop showing up? Like I bet at the Rotary, if suddenly someone's not there for a few meetings, hey, we got to go check on so-and-so and say, what's going on? And I think too often with some of our looser online communities, we can kind of just fade away and there won't, but some there will, you know, and so I think we really need to be asking ourselves that question, and also making sure we're not settling for a 4 out of 10 feeling when we could be getting like a 9 out of 10, you know, because I think they give us some of the same feelings that we get from in person, but we need to ask if they're filling up our cup, you know, as big as it could be. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask you a follow-up question and we'll get
Yeah.
over here? So Jonathan Haidt wrote The Anxiety or Anxious
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
And he talks about how the boys are onliners,
Yeah.
gamers.
Yeah.
Girls tend to be more on the social networks,
Yeah.
and which has been very distracting and causing some issues.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas of what maybe the school systems, the public school systems specifically, could do to help address that and try to get those kids
Yeah.
IRL, as it might be said?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard there are, and I think specifically out of his advocacy work with this book, they're starting to do this kind of like wait until 8th, I think, for some schools. You might be more familiar too if you have school-age kids, you know, where you kind of get all the parents in a community to kind of agree collectively, you know, we aren't going to give our kids cell phones until after 8th grade or whatever age. And I believe in Virginia also they're talking about some statewide policy. I'm not sure if it passed or not about phones in the schools.
The schools can now require phones to be put away
Okay.
in the school system.
Yeah,
All K
yeah.
through 12.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's some interesting questions. I've talked to some educators where it's like no phones in the classroom, but the kids can use them when they're in the cafeteria. But I think that brings up an important question of, you know, there's a lot of really important social learning that's happening in the cafeteria that might be as important as some of the learning we're doing in our, you know, civics class. And so really thinking about both those types of learning, you know, the social in addition to the intellectual.
Yes. First of all, let me just say, I'm not from the area. I happen to be in this weekend visiting my daughter and son-in-law, and I saw this and I thought, oh, I'll check it out. I want to applaud you on the documentary and a lot of the conclusions there. And then I have a couple things to share from my neck of the woods, which is in Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley area, south of Allentown, where we weren't aware of any of this. I just opened the paper and happened to see something.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Where are you going with these programs? Is it kind of wherever they'll
Yeah.
take you, or
Yeah.
do you have a plan? How's that working?
Yeah.
Because this is a great message that we need to get out there,
Yeah.
and we need to turn up the volume a lot in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we are on this big community tour right now. You all are lucky because it isn't often in theaters necessarily. It's been in kind of showing in church basements and coffee shops. And so, it's fun to, get to see it on the big screen again. I've been at a lot of smaller library media rooms and stuff in much less comfortable chairs. But we are on a big community tour. Anyone that wants to bring this film to their community, if you go to joinorddiefilm.com, there's a host a screening button in the upper right-hand corner, and you can fill out a form there, request a screening, and I would say the majority of the groups hosting events are for groups of 25 people or less. We occasionally have, bigger conferences, but we're just going groups of 25 people by 25 people and hoping it, we want it to also raise as many questions, I think, for audiences as it brings up, some answers and ideas. And it's been really exciting to see, what conversations, what questions does it bring up in Lehigh Valley versus in Front Royal, Virginia versus in Los Angeles versus in Texas. And the solutions are going to be different in those places too. So, yeah.
Very good, thank you.
I just wanted to, is it on? Okay. I just wanted to say to this young man, I don't know if you're aware in Front Royal and Royal Plaza of the PlayStation, I think it's called, the toy store, has gaming.
It's Play Favorites. Thank you.
Okay, you want to talk. But it has gaming, has people come in for gaming. You know that.
He's one of my regulars. Thank you so much.
I know him regularly, I talk to him.
Okay.
Do you have a question over here?
No, two things I want to say. Number one, we started watching the movie tonight, and we're like, we've seen this before. This is the second time we've seen the movie. We do not remember where we've seen it. That we're going to have to go back. We belong to a film club in Winchester, and maybe it was shown there. I don't know. Anyway, you talked before about trends, and maybe there'll be a follow-on.
Yeah.
But one of the trends, and if you look at the crowd,
Yeah.
more than half the population here is 50 plus, and we'll be kind. But, and I'm in there.
Yes.
The trend has been that there are retirement communities for 55 plus where they really push the social aspect, because you can go and buy a house anywhere. But becoming part of a community where the social aspect is very important, and we live in Lake Frederick, which is right up the block here, and when we moved in, there were maybe 35 clubs, and it's photography and motorcycles and travel and you name it. Now we have more than 70 clubs because people really want to participate.
Yes.
And it's like you said, you can go home and drink a beer and watch TV, or you can go and do something in a club. Now the other part is, most of us are retired, so there's a lot of time during the day to participate in these clubs as well. But I think it's a trend.
Yeah. What conditions do you find that they created that make it so easy for that many clubs to thrive? Like, is there a newsletter or a space, like a community
There is a
center
website,
that-
but they're also, as part of the community and their
Yeah.
houses, but as part of the community, there's a gym with an indoor-outdoor pool and pickleball courts and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And there is a clubhouse, and the clubhouse has a lot of space for community and for club meetings.
Yeah.
And so I think that's maybe your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I see this kind of like bumper thing happening where I hear this a lot from people that live in some of these more thriving retirement age communities, and then also people who are on college campuses where there's just a lot of, like, you don't have to try as hard. And I think it's that middle group that sometimes, if you're not living in a place where everyone's kind of concentrated together, where there's shared community spaces, where you're hanging out and you just can casually in a conversation bring up that you're doing
Right.
some activity.
And we're doing dinners and wine tastings and all this other
Yes.
stuff. So,
Yeah.
But I think the middle group that you're talking about
Yeah.
also is the group that's squeezed between generations, right? They
Yeah.
take care of their kids, they take care of parents,
Yeah.
and they both work, and so there's never any time.
Yeah, 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 and we hear that, a lot, and I think, we wanted to acknowledge that in the film too, that we need to think about how do we create these conditions to give people more time so you aren't waiting to get, to be retired again or only able to participate more, before you have kind of other obligations. So, one thing I think as I've been talking to people and touring the film, and that this question of time comes up, is, asking folks, similar to doing a technology self-audit, do a daily self-audit of like, is there anything I'm doing alone right now that I could be doing together? And think of what are those things where it isn't such a heavy lift, but, maybe you're taking a walk every day in the morning or running.
Right.
Could you start running together? If you're going to the gym, could you start going with 5 other friends, if you're watching a movie together and, joining a movie club instead of watching Netflix alone.
Sure.
What are those kind of first steps, for folks
Well, and these
yeah.
communities, having a gym also offer the opportunity for exercise classes.
Yeah, yeah.
Which also promotes a more healthy living.
Right. So can we get more kind of public gyms that have childcare also could be another,
Sure.
solution to these, and yeah.
Especially
more
for that
clubhouses.
middle group.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for that, who was the most fun he had some celebrities up there on the screen. Who was fun to talk to, and did Barack Obama just not return your phone call?
He did not return, I will say that. But there were a few attempts. I will honestly say I think it was probably Bob. It was, and he is that energetic off camera. There are some people I've encountered in my career that, really turn it on for the cameras and then are, a little different when the camera stops rolling. Robert Putnam is like that, from 9 a.m. in the morning when he wakes up till, midnight when he goes to sleep. And his enthusiasm and faith in these issues really was contagious for me. I entered this project feeling a little hopeless myself, if I'm being totally honest. Because I'd covered a lot of hard stories as I was coming to this, and I wasn't sure myself if I felt like we could kind of dig ourselves out of some of these trends. But in spending time with Bob and his longer lens on history that I'd also like to see us doing more in the mainstream media, everything's the last 5 minutes. And then spending time with these community leaders that we both feature in the film and all the ones I've met as we've been touring it, I feel like I've taken on some of Bob's enthusiasm myself, so.
First, thank you for coming. I think you did a fantastic job on the film, and its timing is couldn't be better. And Rick, thank you for bringing this to our town. It's very enlightening. So, a couple things. One is, if you talk about the socialization, how important it is to social capital. If you look at all the blue zones in the world, that's a key element of longevity for people. You can have the best health, exercise, eat well, but if you don't have that one critical ingredient of socialization, you don't get along. So I found that really enlightening. I also saw, I'm Japanese, and I saw this JACL, Japanese American Citizen League, was the only league I thought that was kind of cool. So but I guess, given that today, it seems, in my opinion, that this country has never been more divided. And as such, how do you believe things like this division of our country, the lack of and removal of DEI initiatives across the corporate and federal government, et cetera, how that's going to affect the social capital? We were touring this film as we were heading into an election and didn't know which way that election was going to go, but my brother and I both felt, no matter who was coming into political office, these trends were going to need every American
getting to work at the local level no matter what. And so I think, staying in this kind of like focus on the local right now has really been, a North Star for me since the start of this project, and I think was going to remain a North Star no matter what happened at the national level. So, as I look at political polarization right now, that wasn't going to change overnight no matter who was coming into office. And knowing these trends, it took us a long time to get to this place. This was decades and decades of decline, which I think was another thing that drew me to Bob's work is, for my generation, a lot of us think this just started with our cell phone, and his work shows, maybe that has accelerated things, but this has been coming for a long time. So this is going to be slow work as we turn it around. But the other hopeful story, that I see in that is, when you start planting seeds, Bob often says social capital is the only type of capital that when you spend it, it grows. It doesn't decrease. And so I think, really focusing on what are the seeds that we can start, planting right now. What are the stories of people in our community planting those seeds that we can lift up so that our younger people know where to look, both to get involved themselves and for inspiration. What are the stories from our own history that we can celebrate so people have that education about how so much of this country was built by a bunch of people whose faces we don't recognize, which was another thing that I think we hoped with this film was, how do we make an alternative textbook that's filled with a bunch of people's faces sitting around in meeting rooms that no one has any idea who they are, but who were the power behind all the faces, that did achieve all these
And
big ones for the country.
if you look
Yeah.
at the graph, right?
Yeah.
Because initially you started with the decline, degradation in the graph, but if you rewind the tape and you look at,
Yeah.
because you see the graph going up,
Yeah.
what are those things that contributed to that growth, right?
Right.
That's one, and because,
Yeah.
Putnam he's a kind of a legend at Harvard. I never attended his classes, he was in school, JFK School of Government. I went to college there.
Okay, yeah.
But I know a lot of people took his course.
Were you there in that Bowling Alone era, like around 2000?
Yeah, a little while ago, actually longer.
Okay. We can
Because
call you
I'm
out.
one of the fellows that says that,
Okay.
So, but yeah, the data is amazing what he has.
Yeah.
You have to use that data to try to influence us to get us back on the right track.
Yeah, and I think another thing I love about his work, as you mentioned, is like he's looking back at us on our own history, which I think is another inspiring story, because you also brought up blue zones, and I think it can be easy in the headlines to say, oh, this thing happened over here in Japan or in Norway or something, and for people here to write it off like, oh, they can do that there, but our situation is different here. But Bob's looking back at us, in our own history, where the pendulum between kind of the individual and the communal has, kind of swung in different directions. And I have a lot of hope seeing that, yeah. Yeah, I want to hear about this gaming.
Well, first off, is it back on here? First off, thank you very much to Ms. Braun for the nice plug, and thank you to Louis. And I just wanted to fill you with a little bit of hope for that. So yeah, we have a gathering space where people come to gather. And yeah, it's a toy store and a board game store, but we realized very quickly on it's a therapy store. Enough about us, though. I wanted to talk about all the people in here, specifically tying off of Ms. Braun. People want to help each other. As soon as Louis was talking about his problem, she says, hey, have you heard about this place? Almost everybody in here, I think, was invited directly by someone else. So we had all the online advertisements, but having somebody reach out and come, Hannah wouldn't have come invited and say, come with me. And that personal touch, it's out there, it's living strong, and yeah, there's hope. Hang on to it.
Yes, I love that. How long has the store been open?
The store's been open about 5 years, but we took it over last year and have been moving and shaking along with it.
Yeah. Are there things that you think would make it easier for other people to do what you're doing that you'd like to see changed?
I would have to leave that to other people. We're still figuring out as we go along. It's amazing though. Using Hannah as a description here, she's a teacher. She was inspired by Miss Frizzle. So she sells her earrings there that are Miss Frizzle inspired. And that brings people so much hope. So we have teachers come in and say, wow, this is really cool. And that makes them happy and that makes their students happy. And when you're able to have that little spark, all it takes is a spark to light that fire.
Yeah.
And it's more than just education, it's inspiration. So you were both talking about what a legend Rob Putnam is, that he has that enthusiasm, and it's that enthusiasm that's contagious. And that's hard to build a culture of. And we've definitely got a little bit of magic inside the shop, so you should come on down.
Yes, what's it called again?
It's Play Favorites. It's over by Martin's and Earl King.
Okay, cool. Excited to check that.
So, as a teacher, I see that our youth are honestly overscheduled these days. My students are struggling to fit anything else into their schedule. You know, they want to join in and engage, but there's just so much going on. I think that is true in high school. There's lots of clubs in college, but then maybe there's a gap in opportunities as you move out of that structured academic world. And what can we do to empower young people to be more engaged in our community? Because I know I've struggled with it over time, and that's one of the reasons that we were so excited to take over the toy store was, oh, we get to play a positive role in our community.
Yes.
So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was actually just screening the film earlier this week and talked to two parents who brought up this interesting flip that they feel like they've noticed where kids used to come along to the parents' activities and now parents go along to the kids' activities. So, you know, I think what that says to me is we need to make sure there's more care for kids in our community so that when parents do want to be involved themselves, that they have capacity to go be involved by, you know, some type of mutual, you know, childcare offering. And then what I have also been hearing this a lot from people about the overscheduling, or especially in kids' sports, kind of like the professionalization of it, where there's less room for the kids to be creating the space and what it looks like and creativity. And I see you nodding your head, so this might be very familiar, where it's like extremely structured. So I think as we're kind of, you know, thinking of activities for our children, how do we make sure they're starting to learn those leadership roles that become so important once you're in something, you know, when you're in the Rotary Club or wanting to start your own club? How do we make sure the spaces where they are participating, they can be the leaders at it and not just kind of filing into a system to, you know, become an elite athlete? And then I also think, what are the economic forces at play that's making families feel this pressure who do have overscheduled kids, you know, because there's fear around, you know, an understanding of what it means to achieve, you know, for them to be able to go be successful. And how do we start, confronting those pressures? No small thing, but it can start with starting a club maybe where there's the chance for the kids really to be the leaders. I've also talked to some teachers that have, as we've screened the film, they've done assignments for some of their civic or government classes for the kids to do like a dig where you stand research project on their area, because there's a lot of people that, you know, maybe don't know anything about the civic history of their area, and so that can be a fun civics project to get the students in your town to kind of research, you know, what are some of the clubs and organizations. I learned in the course of making this film, we have a library in my hometown in Falls Church, the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library. Never knew who Mary Riley Stiles was till I made this film. Turns out, surprise, surprise, she was part of the women's club movement. She, you know, was in a group of women that were, you know, probably self-educating in book clubs, you know, as they were left out of the more formal university education system. And that group of women said, you know, why don't we, instead of just sharing these books around ourselves, open a public library so all the kids in town have access to books? And here we are 100 years later. That was my public library. But, you know, every town across America has a million stories like that we, you know, can put some of our students to work helping us kind of unearth and recognize too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is, all right, so as somebody pointed out, more than half of us in here are over 50. Have you had an opportunity to screen this in front of school groups?
Yeah.
And what's their reaction? Are they just bored to tears, or you know, I mean, because maybe
Yeah.
it's too deep, you know, for somebody
Yeah.
in high school? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we had a younger audience in mind, I will say, and some people might notice who've watched other docs, this doc does move pretty fast. We really don't stay on a subject much longer than the length of a TikTok. So hopefully that's a familiar format to some of the younger folks that are watching now. And I also told our incredible animator Mark Lopez, who did all the awesome animations, like, get weird, have fun, use crazy colors, like really bring this civic life, to life. So we did have a younger audience in mind as we were making this, because I was like, Bowling Alone came out in 2000. There's a whole other generation that wasn't even born when that book came out and needs the ideas in that book now more than ever. And so we have been doing, some screenings at high schools with younger folks. We also want to make some like shorter educational materials out of the film, shorter cuts that could be used as tools. But I think what we do see is, some of our screenings do reflect the trends that we address in the film, which is there is this cohort change that happened. And anyone that wants to read deeper on that, in Bob's book, Bowling Alone, he really goes into the fall off, was happening across the board, but is happening much more rapidly at the younger generation. And the kind of baby boomer cohort, even into the 90s, as he was doing the Bowling Alone research, was continuing to join at higher rates than the younger cohort. So there was some type of generational cohort drop off, a cultural shift ultimately that happened with this younger generation. So as there is an event at the public library, it does end up being a lot of this super joiner generation that keeps coming out, but we're trying to do our best to,
So
get
do you
this in front
think
of
we
young people.
can reach them because they're the ones we need to get them to start
Yes.
thinking about joining in high school or
Yes.
post-high school,
Yes.
and being in our clubs,
Yes.
and our civic organizations in our communities and
Yeah.
churches and.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that we are trying our best, and I think that was our hope. As much as our focus has really been on this community tour, we did also want to try to get it on Netflix or on a streamer, because we do know that's where a lot of eyes are at these days. And so I
It's a
think
secret, but it is on Netflix.
it is on Netflix
Thank you
now,
for
so you
coming
can't
and
tell
paying
your
tonight.
friends there. We prefer you watch it like this, but it is available there. So
Mike, you edit
as,
that out of your footage, okay?
as people are flipping through their true crime, we hope, they do happen upon this. And unfortunately, Netflix doesn't share any of that data with us. But we do see, reviews from younger people on Reddit and on Facebook. And, but yeah, tell all the young people in your life.
All movies are better when you share them with people.
Yes, I agree.
Well, we also, we know the young, just human nature, that we want to have a connection with other people.
Yes.
And they're finding it, but they're finding it in maybe places that they shouldn't be finding it, or they're finding it in places that are harmful to them, as opposed to
Yeah.
in person,
Yeah.
or at least in some kind of social aspect that's in a community Louis was talking
Yeah.
about, even if it might not be tangible
Yeah.
right there. So, but I think there's some public policy stuff we can do
Yeah.
in terms of destructuring or giving some kids free free play in
Yes,
school, or
yes.
free play as opposed to constantly, because they'll create their own social clubs within their
Yes.
playground, and a little more free time. And then, this is something I know my mother, who's here, laments, is that overstructuring of our kids. Sunday mornings was, church was the social fabric of our life growing up.
Yeah.
And now soccer, travel soccer, or baseball, or whatever fills in that spot, and
Yeah.
we're off, and
Yeah.
that institution suffers for it. So
Yeah.
there's quite a few things, and
Yeah.
unless there's any other questions, I won't let you wrap up anything, but I just want to say thank you.
Thank you all.
Again, so much, everybody here, for being here. This is a first step to hopefully having that pre-1950s curve go up.
Yes,
Without
yes.
the negativity and bad things in
Yes,
1950s.
yes, we gotta keep
But we
pushing.
can have the social fabric and social structure rebuilt.
Yes.
And hopefully that's a pendulum swing that's headed in the right way. So
Yes.
you came out from Washington DC. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you
What
all.
would you like to say? Anything else?
I think it's here all week, right? So this was the first night that it was kicking off, so if you have
Yep, we have
friends.
3 shows tomorrow, 3 shows Sunday, and then the middle of the week, it'll be showing at 7 o'clock, Monday through Thursday.
Great, yeah, so tell your friends, catch it in the theater while they can. And anyone who wants to host a screening, you can head to our website, joinorddiefilm.com. And yeah, thank you all for being out here tonight.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed the chat.
Thank you.